Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to GT Academy. As you can probably see, it's on thinking time, so this is going to sort of apply to all of the sort of guides I've given to how to improve driving wise, so accelerating, braking, cornering, things like that, and how you sort of have so much to think about in a certain period of time that how can you improve sort of your decision making and how much you can think of in a given time. So we're going to look at certain situations throughout this video. I've got different clips everywhere, and then I'll explain how I improve my own thinking time, and so I make decisions quicker, and then sort of use decisions I've made to then be able to automatically do something to then, you know, think about other things in the situation. So we're going to start off with a simple license test. So as you can see, it's in the Audi TT, and it's just a straight accelerate and brake. Not much to think about. I've got, looking at the times, 19-20 seconds to think about it. All I'm doing is changing gear and then judging when to brake. Very simple, not much to think about. I have loads of time to think about it. Here, we're on Nürburgring. It's the same again, I'm just accelerating and changing gear. I've got the slight corner here to then put myself in a position for the chicane, and then brake and judge the chicane. Now the thing with a corner, as I've explained in the past, is I may have to adjust my braking slightly, and I'm obviously changing gears to come down and things like that. So I've got a little bit more to think about, but I have the straight beforehand to think about it. So I'm not sure what the time was there, but let's have a gander at the time. Bit further back, so it was 57 seconds and it goes up to 1 minute 11. What's that, 15 odd seconds or whatever that is. That's still a lot of time to think about it. You know, I can do that very easily. I can think about that and put my car where I want it and decide what I want to do. So we're watching a go-kart lap here of Autumn Ring. Now essentially with corners, and when they start flowing, it gets that tad bit more difficult. Now I'm showing this because all I'm doing is maximum acceleration and turning the wheel, and then I'm putting the car where I want to. But I'm having to decide it for each corner, so the thinking time suddenly becomes less, because obviously each corner, so I've got like a second between that corner and that corner, a second between that corner and that corner, another second or two, and then another second or two to do that. But I've also got to decide this. I have to decide this before I get to the corner where I want my kart. So suddenly when I put, as you can see there, it's a 39-second lap-ish. I've got 39 seconds to pick, I don't know how many corners there are, like 12 corners. I've sort of got to apply that all in one go, but then I've also got to think about, if I do make a mistake in that lap, how do I compensate that for the rest of the corners. So on Autumn Ring, it has that fast-flowing section, as we just saw. Let's go back a bit further. So as we come to this fast flowing section, if I make a mistake in this part, for example, I then have to sort of react to it in all these other parts, and that's where thinking time then has more of an effect, because you're now doing something new, you've made a different decision, and suddenly the thinking time becomes less. So in that situation, this is where the good drivers, the better drivers, the aliens, they suddenly start extending their leads because they can react quicker and make decisions quicker, and they have more time to think. So we'll just play this bit through and we'll go to the next clip. So here again we're on Autumn Ring, we're on a bit larger track. So now we have braking involved in a similar situation. Now if I've got braking involved as well as accelerating as well as the corners, that's another element to add to my thinking time. I'm now having to think, right, okay, accelerating, braking, my turn, where do I want the car? You know, what happens if the car does this, what happens if the car does that? I can't think about like anything else outside Gran Turismo at this point. I have to think about the car and what it's doing, where I want to be, what gear, you know, braking, do I want to trail brake slightly here, do I want to accelerate here? Suddenly the thinking time is shrunk again. So we've gone from the Audi TT, where it was a huge, you know, I had 16, 19 seconds, whatever it was, to think about just starting and stopping and changing gear, to suddenly now it's dropping down to less than a second to think about each individual corner. Now, this is where again the aliens sort of start going even further apart. You'll find that in a fast flowing track, an alien will have a bigger gap over the lesser drivers than, say, a fast flowing track where there's no corners or there's a lot more thinking time. So I'm thinking high speed ring, for example. You'll find that there's a lot closer races on high speed ring than there is, say, Nürburgring. Obviously that's a huge track, but the principle's there. You know, in the fast flowing sections, cars you won't see much of a gap difference, but when you get into the corners and the really flowing parts of the track, suddenly drivers start increasing gaps like exponentially. And it's the same here with this. So here we have a race. So we talked about braking, accelerating, turns, deciding gears and things like that. Now we have other races involved. So that further reduces the thinking time, because I'm not only thinking about all the other sort of decisions that I'm making or thinking about, I now have to think about other drivers as well and their position on the track. So once again, shrinks the gap, then extends between, you know, the aliens and other drivers. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is differences in speed in general. So I'll just pause it here before we go on to the next clip, and just explain the speed aspect. So obviously I said about the thinking time being reduced from 19 seconds with the Audi down to this, we'll say, the Golf with the races involved as well, where you've got less than a second to decide on maybe a fast flowing part or like autumn ring, and you decide in individual like corners. Imagine you put races in that situation, your thinking time's reduced even more, and plus the predictability is a lot less as well. Now if nothing is predictable, you're constantly thinking, and obviously then that your thinking time is just non-existent. You have to decide instantly, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, and it has to be right. To get the best lap, it has to be right. So with speeds, obviously with faster cars, because you'll notice this as well, because slower cars, you have more thinking time. You'll notice that slower car races, should I say, you'll notice they are much closer than really fast races, which the next clip will sort of show. It's not a race per se, it's a time trial, but you'll understand why in a second. But the fact that you are, if you're racing a faster car, the leaders are extending the gap quicker, is just the fact that they're making decisions quicker. And say you're in a very oversteered car, they're making the decision to apply that much throttle that bit better, rather than maybe somebody else who's thinking, okay, I might need to apply this much throttle, wait, no, I need to apply this, no, it's already over the corner, you know, you're on the next corner, which is where the time differences come in. A key example of this, by the way, if you watch Top Gear, Richard Hammond, when he does the F1 car drive that he does, so he starts off in the Formula Renault, I believe he starts off in, small little Formula car used for the young drivers, and he's very confident in that. Suddenly he gets put in I think it's the Indy car next he goes in, and suddenly his thinking time's a lot less, and he says this himself. He thought he was in the wrong gear. By the time he realised he was in the right gear, he was already through the corner and going on to the next, and he span it, and and everything else. So it's about making the correct decisions at the right time. And obviously with the faster cars and everything else involved, the thinking time's reduced. So how do you improve? So what I'm going to show you next is the X2010. Obviously, it's like the ultimate thinking time. So this is my fastest lap, which I did ages and ages ago. And as you can see, the thinking time of this is ridiculous. I mean, look at that. I've got to think about everything so quickly. I've got to make sure I'm deciding this line now. I'm deciding this. I'm deciding that. I'm deciding that. I'm trying to think so far ahead that I may have a chance to alter something, or think about something. So essentially, with thinking time, in this situation where thinking time is so minute, I've already decided, for example, how I want to enter the spoon corner, which is coming up. I've already decided where I want to be on the straight after. I've already decided where I want to be on the first corner of the lap. And that's how I improve my thinking time. Because obviously it's so small, if I got to a corner and then had to decide, I'd start questioning myself. If I've already decided what I'm going to do beforehand, I can think about everywhere else on the track, and suddenly my laps can improve. Obviously, if something happens, I can react to that situation, because I already know where I want to be in 3 or 4 corners time. Ayrton Senna said he was always driving a lap ahead or something like that. It's the same principle. He's already knows where he wants to be, on where his car's going to be before he's even there. Sort of like predicting the future. So as you can see, I'm taking the same similar lines, same sort of speeds, doing the same sort of braking, same sort of accelerating. I'm not having to make those decisions because I've already made them. I'm doing them when I'm on the corner. That's one way to improve your thinking time. Because essentially driving is a pattern as well. When you start doing lap after lap after lap after lap, you'll notice you're doing the same gear changes at about the same time, you're accelerating about the same time, and you're braking about the same time. So we're about to approach the end of this lap, so I'll just pause it here, and I'll just explain another way to improve. Now, you may have heard of it, you may not have, I don't know. StarCraft 2. You can use other games for this as well. Basically, real-time strategy games playing at like the most highest speed or against the highest caliber player you possibly can. So in StarCraft, for example, it's the biggest esport game around, and players in that have to make split decisions, but they have to do them there and then. They can't predict. They sort of can try and predict, like a race car. I'm going to be here, I want to be here, I want to be in that gear at that time when I get there. But because it's real-time strategy, things change all the time. In a race, same thing happens, things change all the time. So you got to make decisions very quickly. And it's games like StarCraft, for example, where actions per minute and things like that can start having an effect on your decisions. Like the South Koreans are considered the best real-time strategy players, and some of their best players can go at 400 actions per minute on a keyboard and mouse. 400 actions. That is a lot of movement on your keyboard. Whereas, like all around the world, like for me, for example, I can hit about 200 actions per minute on average. That could be just because my limits on the keyboard, but it's also due to my thinking time. In that situation, I need to improve it. But yeah, things like that. If you play different games, they can also help you with thinking time. Like Gran Turismo, the X2010 is a perfect example of a good tool to use to help improve your thinking time. You may think it's a stupid car, why is it in the game? But it can be useful. It really can be useful. And I would highly recommend to use it. So, with thinking time, as I've explained through that video briefly, you could start off with very easy decisions to make, and then suddenly you build it up, and suddenly it can be like 10 decisions in one corner, or 10 decisions in 1 second. It can be 20 decisions in 1 second. It suddenly builds up hugely. You sort of got to have already made some of those decisions to have the best effect. So as I mentioned with Ayrton Senna, he was always driving so far ahead, he understood where the car was going to be. Obviously, if something changed, say suddenly there's a bit of oil on the track, he would have to then change that decision on just that corner. But because he knew what he wanted to do on that corner beforehand, he didn't have so much to decide. He could just decide that one particular question and then do it. So that's thinking time. It's a bit of up there really with sort of how you drive and stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed that brief video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode, which I'll try and find out what it is. So yes, thank you very much for watching.